Hello, everybody. Yes, so today's workshop is Audience, Purpose and Form, Why English is Important in Journalism. And the learning outcomes are really to think about one particular piece of journalism, and there was some pre-work set ahead of this, but we will go through it through the course of this mini workshop. Consider who it's written for and why it's written in a certain style. Think a little bit about how journalists get their stories and consider what's important for journalists when they're conducting research. And then we'll also talk a little bit, just a little bit, about different styles for TV and radio, as well as print or online. We'll also talk a bit about my own career, because I'm now a lecturer at Buckinghamshire New University, but I was a journalist for 25 years before that. And a little bit about routes into the industry and things that you can even start thinking about now. Year 9 is not too early to start thinking about your future. But why is English important for journalism? Well, quite simply because it's a communications medium and you want to tell stories and tell them in the simplest, plainest way possible. As journalists, we think about the 5 W's when we write a news story: who, what, where, why, and when. I've given you the answers, but I'm sure you could have worked that one out. We write headlines which catch the eye. We use subheadings with key facts to sell a story. And in our intros to any written piece of journalism for print or online, we look at answering some of those important 5 W's with the key facts of the story. At every step of the way, though, the copy, as it's called, the text for a journalist, needs to be well written and in plain English. So these 5 W's are an inverted pyramid. The who, what, where, why, and when, the most important facts of any story, are front-loaded right at the top of the piece. And then there's more background information the lower down we get, including how, of course. An intro or an introduction to a story really needs to be short and snappy. I use the term kiss with impact. Keep it short and simple and give it some impact as I snap my fingers. So really it should be no more than 18 to 25 words to sell a particular story, and less if possible. And all of this, of course, means that English is of prime importance. So before this workshop, I set a little bit of a pre-exercise. It was a story I found in the Bucks Free Press, the local weekly paper here in Buckinghamshire, a few weeks ago, about a little girl called Lyra Capet, 7 years old, awarded a certificate of appreciation by the High Wycombe Mayor. Her father's a teacher. He's had to have dialysis treatment for a kidney condition, and he lost blood very quickly at home one day. Lyra got some towels, helped to stem the bleed, and called 999. And she's learned life-saving skills as she's grown up. And the mayor, Councillor Maz Hussain, described her as an absolute star. So I asked students to see if they could try to write this story. And depending on how you did, I wonder if it looked anything like what did appear in the Bucks Free Press. So that was the headline: inspirational 7-year-old who saved dad's life 3 times, recognised by High Wycombe Mayor. It appeared in the online version of the paper as well as the print edition. And the intro, remember, short and snappy, 18 to 25 words, an inspirational 7-year-old who helped save her ill father's life 3 times has been recognised for her bravery. So, which of the 5 W's were answered in the intro? Well, for me, it's who, what, and why. Who? The inspirational 7-year-old. What? She was recognised for her bravery. And why? Because she helped save her ill father's life 3 times. Then, as we go lower down our inverted pyramid, we find out where it happened. We know it was in High Wycombe. And then even lower down still, we get an indication of when and how, because her dad was rapidly losing blood. So that's a good exercise in the inverted pyramid. But why are those questions important? Why, again, is English important in journalism? Certainly in the written form here that we're talking about, print and online. Well, we want to make the story engaging and we want to communicate to the broadest possible audience, give the reader all the most relevant information about a story. This is also not just about writing, this workshop, but also about research. And if you're thinking about a career in journalism, and I have to say it's a fabulous career, you do need to think about where stories might come from. So where might that story have come from? Well, perhaps one of the people in the story rang the newspaper. That's possible. It could have been a press release from the mayor's office at the council. It could have come from some official documents. Whenever the mayor is involved in an engagement, it's minuted or put onto an agenda. They might have found it on the internet, perhaps social media, or indeed another news story. And in general, not perhaps in this story, because it's not a controversial story, we must ask, is the story credible? We live in an era of fake news, don't we? So we need to ask whether we can believe what we're being told and whether it's trustworthy. Can it be verified? In other words, can the journalists get a second source to make sure they know the story is real? And does it need to be balanced, particularly if a person or an organization is being criticized or it's a political story? We want to tell both sides of the story. So that's a little bit about writing and research for print and online. Remember, the story stands alone. The words tell the story, and the story follows a headline, either in print or on a website. But if you think about radio for a moment, the written words will follow a presenter link or an introduction on the radio. The words will still tell the story, but unlike in print or online, the listener doesn't have an opportunity to go back and hear it again. So it needs, again, to be nice and clearly written in plain English. And if you think about writing for TV, writing is also incredibly important for TV, because a television news story needs pictures to tell the story. It's a conversation with pictures. Have a think about this for a minute. A few weeks ago, this
Neil, just stop there a second. You seem to have gone on mute. Take a couple of steps back.
Oh, beg your pardon. Am I
No
back?
worries.
Am I
Yeah,
back?
you are. You are. It seems to have been
good.
just a small glitch. And also your presentation has just come off the screen.
Oh, hold on. So you can't see the screen now?
Not at the moment. Can see you.
It's disappointing. Share screen again. I was in full flow as well.
I know, that was a shame. You were in full flow. It was good though.
Are we back?
There, we are back. There we go. Back in business.
Okay, so a few weeks ago, can you hear me? Can you still hear me, Max?
Yes, we can. Absolutely.
Okay, so a few weeks ago, this was the start of a story. The government will bring forward proposals on how to safely reduce the 2-meter social distancing rule in England this week, says Matt Hancock. Now, do we think that was for TV, radio, or print or online? Has anybody got any ideas? Can we quickly see if we can get some ideas from people in the room? If not, I will continue.
Remember, people, if you've got ideas, put it in the chat box. Let's see those ideas. Let's see those answers.
Remember, for television, the words need pictures. For radio, the words follow a presenter link. And for print or online, the words stand alone.
Or somebody's put print. Bucks UTC have put television, so we've got
interesting. Bucks UTC went for television and Laddie's gone for print. Well, the answer is
radio.
Print. News and online, because the story stands alone. Okay, look, here's another one. The signs, this is the same story, by the way. The signs, they are changing. In the next few days, the government's expected to announce that early next month, people in England won't have to keep 2 meters apart. Same question. Is that for print or online, or television or radio?
We got TV.
Laddie's gone TV.
Yeah.
What about Bucks UTC? Come on, Bucks. TV. And why? Because the story needs pictures. That is indeed for TV. If you think the signs, they are changing, how's that illustrated? That's illustrated by moving pictures. But whatever the platform, whatever the medium, remember, English is so important. You must write with your audience in mind in plain English. Be sparing with the use of adjectives. We don't want flowery, colorful language. We want simple language. Paraphrase quotes, but don't distort them, and write how you would speak. Broadcasters are in conversation with the listener. Okay, a little bit about my own career path. That's me in the middle a long time ago. You might see a collection of some dodgy ties here. But 1990 to 93, I went to the University of York and studied politics before doing a postgraduate diploma in newspaper journalism in Preston at the University of Central Lancashire. And I became a newspaper reporter for 5 years at the Liverpool Echo, Daily Post and Echo, and then the News of the World, which some of you may well have heard of. It's no longer in existence, but that's a whole different workshop. And then for 21 years, I worked as a television journalist at ITV Meridian, at ITV News, that's ITN, at BBC South East Today, and BBC Sport. And then for the last 10 years, I was at a big sports production company called IMG, working on Premier League productions, the global Premier League TV output. Today, I'm the journalism lecturer at Bucks New University, but it all started at the Daily Post in Liverpool, and I was sent up this really tall tower, 250 feet up in the sky. At one of my first jobs, there was a crane driver with the best view in Liverpool, and I was sent up to scale a vertical ladder to go and get an interview with him. Quite an interesting start to my journalism career. Liverpool FC football club had a very famous striker in the 1980s and 90s called Ian Rush, and I got the exclusive when he left the club. He was their record goal scorer. I interviewed him, by the way, just as he was doing his school run. So that's him outside his mansion-esque house.
Was that just before he moved to Italy?
It was the second time. He'd come back from Italy, and it was the second time he was at Liverpool. So it was when he was giving up Anfield for good. Wow. I did some great stuff. I went training with the army in Cyprus. That's me handling the SA-80 semi-automatic rifle. And Max and I were talking just before this workshop about the former Iraqi dictator, Saddam Hussein. And when I was in Bermuda, where I worked on the Royal Gazette, I once posted him a pair of Bermuda shorts. And that's me on the front page of the paper, sending Bermuda shorts to an Iraqi dictator. I don't know if he ever got them. And it's a long story why I did that, but it was quite a funny story that made the newspaper. I covered the Harry Redknapp's son, Jamie Redknapp. He got married to Louise from a pop band in the 1990s in Bermuda, and I covered their wedding. And then I worked in TV, and I got to meet some of my heroes. That's me with Ian Botham. That's not when I was a journalist, that's when I was 14 years old. But when I met him through the course of my career at the BBC Sports Personality Awards show, he signed my picture for me, which I'd kept since I was a teenager. At ITN, I did lots of on-screen reporting. I interviewed Sir Bradley Wiggins, who won the Tour de France, and Paul McCartney, as I'm sure many of you know, from the Beatles. And then for the last 10 years, I worked at IMG and Premier League Productions on their global TV news output. So if ever you're on holiday elsewhere in the world and you're watching a Premier League football match, that would be IMG's coverage. And I also wrote 2 books on my first love, apart from my family, of course, which is Everton Football Club. They're the various routes that I've managed to travel in my own career in journalism. But what about you and yours? Because it's such a fantastic career that I really would encourage you to pursue it if you're interested in it. And when I started in journalism in the mid-1990s, there weren't too many jobs available. You could be a local newspaper, perhaps, or if you were lucky, you might get a job on your local radio station. But now you could work as an online journalist or a digital content producer. You might get to go and work as a broadcast journalist in TV or radio. And there are a whole range of technical roles in media as well. For instance, from being a satellite engineer to a photographer or video editor, or even a vlogger or a blogger in the 21st century digital world that we now live in. So there are many, many opportunities for you if you do wish to pursue a future career in media. But what do you need to start doing now? You might think, oh, that's many years off. Why should I even think about a route into journalism now? I'll worry about it when I'm much older. Well, you're never too young to start practicing the skills. And this workshop is about English and the importance of English in journalism, So start writing. If you love writing, if you love telling stories, then do it. Keep a book, get some stories, talk to your friends. Where do stories come from? They come from talking to people. So many people now, you know, have got one of these, of course, a smartphone, and they're using it for their Instagram or TikTok or WhatsApp with their friends. But you know what? It's actually a phone as well. So talk to people whenever you can. I do say get a degree. That's not compulsory. You don't have to get a degree to be a journalist. There are some apprenticeships available, but I do believe it gives you a head start once you've done the degree and you've learned all the key foundation skills required to be a successful journalist. Learn about the different platforms. And when I say that, I mean newspapers, websites, TV, radio. Learn about the differences between them. We've just touched on them a little bit here today, but learn about them. Build contacts, get to know people. What do your friends do and your family and your friends' family? Are they involved in charities or sports clubs or local organizations or community groups? Find out about them. See where the stories are. Be interested in the world around you. Now, you're probably a little bit, it's probably a little bit too soon for you to start thinking about some of these things, but then ultimately you can do some work experience when you're a bit older. And of course, when you're older still, you might get an opportunity to do some freelancing and then apply for jobs. But throughout your route into journalism, you will make your own luck. And when I say that, what I mean is you'll get out what you put in. If you work hard now, if you start writing, if you do the practice, if you begin storytelling, you'll give yourself a real advantage over others when it comes to it. So about you, what are the skills you need? Well, you do not just need to be a good writer. You'll see I've got writing skills in there. These are not necessarily in an order of importance. And perhaps those first three adjectives are all synonyms, really. They're all quite similar, aren't they? You will need to be determined and persistent and tenacious. That means getting a story and not giving up. You'll need to be passionate and want to do it and want to tell stories and be curious about the world. You must have those writing skills, of course, which we've talked a little bit about today, and a news sense. And what I mean by that is an idea about what makes a good story, because after all, journalism is really about a love for storytelling. But also, I believe in ethical journalism and doing things the right way. So you'll be a loyal person and a trustworthy person, an honest person, and fair-minded. Well, that's the lesson and a chat about my own career and some roots into journalism. There's rather an embarrassing picture of me from the first lockdown when I hadn't been to the barbers in quite some time, and I'm expecting to be in that state again quite soon. But I'm here now for the next few minutes. If you wish to ask me any questions, it would be my pleasure to answer them. Thanks very much for listening so far.
I mean, that's been, I've quite enjoyed that, actually, I must say, Neil. That's very nice. Let's get the questions in, guys. What can we ask Neil? What do we want to know about? I must say, I did find it interesting the way that you explained about the different ways of using English for different types of media, like for print, television, and radio. Never thought about that. So, yeah, so we've got a question here. What made you decide to pursue your career? And did you have any other thoughts before deciding on journalism?
The honest answer to that is no. And I guess I was lucky in that I always knew what I wanted to do. When I was very young, my father was a journalist and my mum worked in the telesales department, the advertising department of the same newspaper. So after school, I would go along to the office, sit by my dad's desk and practice on his typewriter. Obviously, it was typewriters then. It wasn't PCs and Macs like we have now. It was old-fashioned typewriters then. I'm afraid I'm getting old. But I loved it. I loved the atmosphere. I loved the environment. I loved the thought of being a journalist. When I was about 12 or 13, I was extremely geeky and I fell heavily into cricket. And for a moment, I thought, probably quite a brief moment, I thought I'd like to be a cricket statistician. But no, I never really had any other thoughts apart from being a journalist. Another question from Laddie. What have been your favorite and worst moments of my career? Do you know, Laddie, that's a great question. And I have been lucky to meet so many famous people and really fulfill some of my own dreams. I've traveled to some great places. in my career. But my favorite and worst moment was actually the same moment, because when I was at the Liverpool Echo, I was the crime reporter. And some people may say, well, you must have been busy there. And indeed I was. And in 1997, the Grand National was called off. The Grand National is in Liverpool, and it was called off on the Saturday because there'd been an IRA bomb scare. IRA terrorists, I'm sure you've heard of, in the 1980s and 1990s, had quite an active bombing campaign in mainland Britain. And there was a bomb scare to the racecourse, a coded bomb warning. And I found out from a police officer in the pub a few weeks later that when the race had been rerun, because the police closed the racecourse, they searched the racecourse, and then they restaged the race on the Monday night. And when the race was rerun, there had been another warning come through from the IRA, which the police in Britain ignored for the first time ever. And I asked him how he knew, and he said he was in the room at the time with the Chief Constable of Merseyside Police and the Prime Minister of the time, who was called John Major. And John Major said, is there a bomb on this racecourse, yes or no? And the Chief Police Officer said no, and the race went ahead. That was my best moment because it was the best story I felt I ever got. But it was also my worst moment because Merseyside Police found out about it. They said no comment when I asked them to comment on the story. We planned to run it. That was good enough for us to corroborate the story because they would have flatly denied it if it hadn't been true. We were planned to run it on page 1. It was going to be a fantastic story. And then the police put pressure on my editor not to run the story because of sensitivities in the city. And I was heartbroken that they caved in my view, to pressure from the police press office. And actually, that was when I went to go training with the army because the news desk could see how crestfallen I was. So that's my best and worst moment wrapped into one. Do I ever think I'll go back to journalism? What do I miss most about it? Yes, I do. I think I will go back and freelance from time to time. There's a chance I might go to the Euros in 2021, the European Football Championships, if indeed they are held, because I was due to go and work there this last summer. If it is restaged next year, there's a chance I'll get to go and do that. And hopefully I'll do some freelancing as well. But what do I miss the most about it? Really, it's the excitement. It's the day-to-day excitement. I love teaching young people who are enthusiastic about a career in journalism, but I miss that day-to-day cut and thrust excitement of every day being different. Oh, the scariest story I ever covered. Well, when I was the crime reporter in Liverpool, there was a used car dealer who ran one of the main gangs in the city. His name was David Ungie, and he was shot dead in a drive-by killing by a rival gang member. And I went to cover his inquest, which is the coroner's court case on ruling exactly how he died. And I met his brother at the coroner's court case, at the inquest. And the next day, David Ungie's mother called me in my office, and she must have been in her 70s, but she called me and she said she was worried about me for all the things I was writing about her late son. So it put quite a lot of pressure on me. I felt quite intimidated, but nothing happened to me, and it was a very exciting time in my life, I have to say. What do I like most and what do I like least about my current job as a lecturer? I like most inspiring young people, and I like least the administrative paperwork. It's not just about teaching, unfortunately. There's an awful lot of admin that needs to be done. That's what I like least. How competitive is it to reach my level of journalism? Well, yeah, it's competitive, but I think all industries are competitive. It is competitive, there's no question. But that's why when I talked to the students earlier about doing things now to give themselves a chance to get ahead when they're a bit older, by starting to write, by introducing themselves to people, by being interested in the world around them, by thinking about stories and learning about the different platforms of journalism. I think the more young people can do at an early age to really pursue what they want to do in later life, the better it will be for them. And actually, even though it's competitive, they will have that competitive edge. Some of these are great questions, by the way. I'm very pleased.
There are actually some great questions in there. I want to ask about that actually, because the question is, how competitive is it to reach your level of journalism? You touched upon it earlier about how the different medias we have now have changed. Do you find that there's a lot more opportunities now to get into journalism because of the different mediums that we have in terms of online and radio and television, all of that stuff? Do you think there's more opportunities now than there were before?
They're just different, Max, I think. There are more opportunities probably because every organization has a content team. Every organization has people doing digital media, social media, that's editing videos for them, writing stories for websites, etc. In the traditional routes, working for your local newspaper, which I did, there are probably fewer of those opportunities. So I think one balances out the other. There are plenty of opportunities in journalism. There really are. And when you see in the news that there are job cuts or things like that across newspapers and broadcasters, the BBC are making some cutbacks, for instance. That is true, but it's also true of many industries. And the good thing about journalism as an industry is it's dynamic. It changes as technology changes. And because we have this digital world that we live in now, there are different opportunities available.
And then I want to ask as well, as a journalist, do you feel, and is there a certain amount of responsibility on journalists because of what you explained earlier about having to be credible, about having to be honest, about having to corroborate your sources? Is there a pressure in terms of having to be at a certain level?
Absolutely. And I really hope that students who are interested in a future media career have been paying a lot of attention to what's been going on in America with the US election at the moment. And if you listen to the things that Donald Trump has been saying and the people around Donald Trump about how the election has been stolen from him and there are fraudulent ballots and he won the election fair and square, if ever you hear that reported, you will often hear, in fact, I think unanimously hear, that the journalists, certainly on the BBC, afterwards will say, there has been no evidence for that. And it is very important that we deal in facts. Impartiality is a very important thing for a journalist, but being impartial doesn't mean we give equal credibility to something which is said like that without a basis in fact to something which is said with a basis in fact. Being impartial means all sides are heard, but as journalists, we have to deal in facts and we have to try to navigate this minefield of fake news. So if suddenly there's a lot of evidence that millions of ballots in America were fraudulent, then that narrative will obviously change. But at the moment, the president's assertions that the election was false has not been proven. And our responsibility as journalists is to make sure that people know that so they can make their own judgments when they hear something like that said. So yes, there's pressure on journalists, but that responsibility is something which we should all feel honored to take on our shoulders.
That's fantastic. That's good. That's good to hear. It makes a lot of sense of what you say as well. So it is 10:45. That is the end of our half an hour lesson. Just before we do run away, if you have got any last second questions, put them in the chat box for us. But obviously, thank you very much to Neil for presenting and bringing that information to us. I hope you guys have found it useful, and it's been useful to see how you tie it in. Like you said, English with journalism, but English is still important. Knowing how to write properly is still important. Sometimes it's a dying art with the way that we write on social media and in SMS and WhatsApp messages. So yeah.
Thanks to everybody for attending. I'm really grateful, and you know what? They were some great questions.
Wow.
And I hope that we've got some aspiring journalists of the future out there.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Neil, and have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.